So, the 1920s. So just that whole general time period there. What do you remember about your normal life? Like, what did you do for fun? What did you do for entertainment? You know, I don't think there were TVs then, but radio
No.
was a normal thing then. What
No.
about movie theaters? Was there a movie theater anywhere within your world?
There could have been, but I didn't go. I didn't know about the movie theater until I think about sixth grade or so. We didn't go to the movies. During the Depression, my dad's father was a conductor on the Northwestern, so he retired, and his pension was $72. And so my dad helped him, and his sister did too. And then my Uncle Frank and Aunt Rose, he lost his job, and they didn't tell anybody. They just kept selling their furniture to pay the rent of the apartment. Finally, they didn't have anything left. So they told my dad, so they moved in with us, and they built a room down in the basement, which was the warmest room in the house. And then my Aunt Florence was moving. That's my grandma's sister. So my great grandma came to live with us. And we already had my grandma. And then a cousin of my dad's called and said he lost his job. So we took one of the sons. So we had quite a house full.
Sounds like it.
And so we had to watch our money. We got a nickel. That's all we got for quite a while. And we'd save it for an ice cream cone.
Oh, nice.
We thought that was so wonderful to go to the candy store and get an ice cream cone.
Where was that?
That was in Spring Road. There was an ice cream store.
Okay.
And so and we didn't know we were poor. I mean, we really weren't. My dad had worked hard and brought the money home, and in fact, the whole neighborhood, none of us knew that they were struggling, more or less. And Bud cut people's lawns to get money. And my dad wouldn't let me babysit because he said, the other girls need the money more than you do. And so I that way I'm not taking it away from them to help their families. But we had a happy childhood. We played baseball and climbed trees, and there was a lot of prairies in Elmhurst, and there weren't too many houses where we were in our subdivision. And we cut the lawn. Behind us was a big prairie, and we got permission from the railroad company. They owned it. And so we kids got the lawnmowers, mowed it down, made a baseball field, and played baseball.
Wow.
And so it's that's it. So.
Okay. So let's see. This is the 20th. So the Cubs have already been in Chicago for a while. So did you follow baseball, or was it just something you played and later on you became?
No, we followed baseball.
Okay.
And,
was that a family thing? Like your dad listened to games on the radio?
He took us, and we would go. What they had was Ladies' Day, and the ladies got in free.
Oh wow. So
we could go then, and he only had to pay for my brother and I. And so we would go those days when the Cubs were in town. And my dad's sister was a piano player for different things. In fact, for Jack Benny, his real name was Benny Kabalski.
Right.
And she used to play the piano when he wanted to play the violin. And so she was a person that was very outgoing. Well, she would take a dish towel with her, and she would be there too, and she would wave her dish towel to show my mother which way to come so that they could sit together. And my mother was so embarrassed. I'll never forget. There's Ruth again.
What was her name again?
Ruth Jacobs.
Jacobs. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was her second husband. Her first husband was Seeber, and she had two boys, Howard and Roy Seeber.
Okay. Wait, how was she related again?
She's my dad's sister.
Dad's sister, and she played piano for Jack Benny.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So, and then also she played. See, they had talkies then. They didn't have speaking ones, and she played the piano in the theater for the the silent
for the
movies.
silent movies. So she would have the movie score, and she would play it during the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's fun.
Yeah. So then when the war broke out, she
Which
was
war are we talking? World War One? World War Two?
World War II.
That's right, because one was in the
Right.
teens, so this is right.
Yeah, I don't know much about World War One. My dad was in that. He was in France.
Oh really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, okay.
But I don't know too much. He never.
Right,
Well, I can tell you something interesting. The people next door to us were German, the Kiefers, and we got acquainted with them, and they spoke German to their German shepherd, so we could never talk to the dog. So they got
That's a German shepherd.
Yeah. So my dad and he got to talking, and he said, "Yeah, we were in such and such a town," and Dad says, "Oh, we were in that town," and he says, "Well," he said, "did anybody get hurt? Because we were putting bombs or whatever you put in it, light bulbs, when you flush the toilet."
Oh really?
And that my dad says they always send experts first. He says nobody got hurt, and he says, but they found them all. He says we had them all over the place, in different places where you wouldn't think of looking. Now that's something I remember.
Okay.
And Mr. Kiefer, and I said here they were the enemies, and here they were now good friends. So it's really something.
So you live next door to a German bomb expert.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Right. At that
Interesting.
time, yeah.
right. Well, God bless him for coming to America and
Yeah.
changing his ways, I guess.
Well, when war broke out, let's see, the government men, G-men they called them, were going wherever there were Germans and asked the neighbors, did they talk about politics? Did they talk about Germany?
Sure.
They wanted to know all that. And so they were all over the place.
Now this is the mid-40s we're talking?
This is when the war started, 1942.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was interesting because when they came and they asked a lot of different, I wish I could remember, and they were tricky questions like,
Sure.
and I wish I could remember some of them. They were here at our house for about a half an hour, 45 minutes, and they went to different houses and wrote down different things that people would say. And
Right.
so,
Well, we're definitely going to have to spend a whole day just on the early 40s because having lived through that, I'll have a lot of questions. But I want to talk about the 20s a little bit more.
yeah.
So when you were growing up in Elmhurst, like I know Elmhurst from the like mid to late 80s and through the
Right.
90s. But what was it like in the 20s when you were growing up there? You said there's an ice cream store. What
Yeah.
else was in Elmhurst that you would visit that was part of your town?
Well, the Spring Road. Now you know where Spring Road is.
I do.
All right, where the apartment building was where the candy store was. There was a store in there, and then across the street was the meat market. We didn't have big things like the Jewel and things.
Sure.
And then the National was next door, and then there was the milk store there, and those were our our stores that we had. That's all.
You had milk, meat, and candy.
N-
That's all anyone needs.
yeah,
What is
and
the National?
the National would be like your A&P or your Jewel. I mean,
Okay, it was the
it was just a small store because there weren't too many people anyhow, but that's where we would get our groceries.
okay.
And so it was a little neighborhood probably, but we just loved it. And there weren't any really cars because people took the Roaring Elgin, and we could actually ride our bikes right down the main street. And we would ride them to Fullersburg, and and there wasn't any traffic really, so it was nice living then. It was very few people, very few cars.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Lori and I always said, let's move out in the country where we don't have all this.
Yeah, the older I get, the more I want to get away from people.
Yeah.
I'm like, I could move to the moon. There's lots of space there. Not
Yeah.
a lot of traffic on the moon. Do you remember the name of the stores? Like, what was the candy store called?
Robin Robin Shoddy was his name, Mr. and Mrs. Robin Shoddy, and they had that, and then Plumback was the butcher.
Plum Black?
Yeah, and then the milk store was I don't remember their name, and then of course I don't know who the cashiers were at the National. Oh, and then the corner there was the drugstore, and
What was that called?
Hi Mabus. Hi, I can't remember his name.
Sounds Polish. Was it Polish?
Probably. We used to
Okay.
just call him Hi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Be easy.
That's when the stamps were 3 cents.
Outrageous.
Yes.
I wouldn't pay it.
It was terrible.
I'd just send an email.
Oh.
Golly, so did your family have a car?
Yes.
What did they have?
My dad had a Ford, and then when the Mercurys came in, he got a Mercury, because he had to drive to work.
Okay.
And he was on the south side of Chicago, where the plant was.
I don't suppose you know what kind of Ford.
What kind of what?
What kind of Ford?
I don't know, just a Ford to me.
Okay.
But
Well, because eventually I'm going to talk to Mike about this or let him listen. He'll go, "Oh, what kind of Ford?" And I'll go, "I don't know," because he's got that. Like he can go through the history of every car. It astounds me. Like
oh,
all the facts and details. I'm learning about every time I go to visit him. He teaches me something about the history of cars.
yeah.
And so like he's got a 1929 Ford F1 that's been turned into a hot rod in his garage.
Oh,
So,
we
You would've
probably
been
had
7
one
years
of
old when
those.
this car was made. And so I'm like, oh, so that's that's the time period that we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Well, Lori had my husband, Lord Scrippen, had a car that he had no. It was like a convertible because there was no roof. He bought it at the. Used to be a junkyard where people would put their cars, so he went over there, and they were just going to put that through the crusher, and so he talked the fellow into giving it to him. So they pushed it home,
when
and he
was this?
worked on it. They pushed the car
Or
home.
when was
This was
ballpark?
let's see. I didn't know him then. He was living in Lombard, but he was telling me about it.
Oh, this is before you met.
This was in the 20s.
Okay.
And so he had that. Oh, and then he fixed it and got money. He sold it and got money. Then he bought it was a small car, and he put 9 horns, a cuckoo clock, and a ooga on there. And he was in grade school then, I think. So that had to be in the 20s. And so he said they had fun with that. He lived in Lombard then.
Okay. Now his family moved to Elmhurst later. Is that right?
Well, they moved to Elmhurst. They sold my aunt and uncle's house because they were moving to California. So Lori lived across the street from me. And
Starting when? When did he move from Lombard to Elmhurst?
1940.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, because that's when my aunt left
Well,
for California.
When did you meet him?
Well, that's it took 2 years for the two of us to get together. He didn't like my cousin, and I didn't like his brother Gil. So they tried to get us together, and we said no, we're fine. And it took 2 years, and then it was like a blind date, because what happened is I came home from work. I worked a half a day on Saturday, and all dressed up, of course, and. I heard him playing ping pong in the basement, so I hollered down to thinking my brother and his friends. I said, I'll be down in a minute. And Bud hollered, "Come in down right now." I said, "No, I can't play ping pong now. Come on." So I went down. Of course, I was dressed up then. He saw me then. He says, "Oh," I said, Gil hadn't said anything yet. So when I got down there's Gil. And I looked, and there's a fella on the couch. And I thought, now who in the heck is he? So they introduced us, and we both looked at one another thinking, oh boy. So I was thinking the same thing he was. We'll go out on a date, and then they'll leave us alone. And that's what we did. We went bowling. Well, we had so much fun. He says, how about going out next Saturday? I said, no, I got a date. I said it without thinking because I didn't know if I wanted to go out with him anymore. And yet we had so much fun. I said, well, listen, I said, okay, I think what I did was got around it somehow. And so we started dating from then on.
All right, hold on. Let me back up and ask a couple details. Where were you working that you were dressed up?
Oh, I worked at, it was a Borum and Pease was the name of it. And I was a computer operator. I had to do, the different companies would buy from us. They would buy office supplies and like Hoarders. And they would get, their discount was 50 and 10%. And then another one was 33 and a third %. I remember that. And I had to remember all this and figure it all out so we knew it. And I loved my job.
I'm sorry, you said you were a computer operator.
It wasn't, it was a contometer. We didn't have computers.
Okay.
A big contometer, but that's like your computers. And not your computers, your calculators.
You were a number cruncher.
Calculators
Okay.
that you put in your pocket now.
So how old were you at this time?
18.
Okay. So,
18, yeah, because I was married at 19.
now again, you said that they were trying to set you up with his brother.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you meet
Oh,
him and his brother? Like how
I
long
met him in 41, the beginning of 41, and because I came home from work, and then we started going together, and.
So until he moved into Elmhurst, you didn't.
Oh, I
never
did.
run into him?
No, I did want to meet him,
Okay.
and he did want to meet me. They lived in Lombard, and then they bought my aunt's house,
Okay.
and so
You
that's.
come home from a long day of number crunching. There's some strange guy on your couch. They set you up.
Yes.
You begrudgingly go bowling. Now, where did you go bowling? Where was there a bowling?
There was a bowling alley in Elmhurst on York Street, and a very nice bowling alley,
Where on
and
York?
on York Street
But where?
in the town, right in the town where all the
like
stores
by the
were.
railroad tracks and
Yeah.
where the downtown area.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Because you'd been talking about Spring Road before, so I'm trying to picture where things are.
Oh well, Spring Road was
That's where the ice cream shop was.
the
So, but the bowling alley is out on York, out
oh
in the downtown area.
the bowling alley's in uptown.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's just a couple miles
So
up.
you just went bowling, or was it dinner and bowling?
Oh no, he didn't have any money either. It was just bowling.
Okay.
And then when he came over the following Saturday, and he said, "Well, let's see, I've got 95 cents. What do we do?"
Now, does he have a car at this time? Is he picking you up in a
He
car?
picked his dad had a car.
You borrowed his dad's car.
Yeah, he borrowed
Okay.
his dad's. So
So he's got 95 cents in his dad's car.
yeah,
How old
And-
is he at this point? You're 18.
he was 4 years older.
Okay.
And it was in the summertime, and he was
So
going
had you
to
graduated
Iowa
high
State.
school? Had you graduated high school?
Yeah, I had already
Okay,
graduated.
this is after you graduated. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'm sorry, how old is he then?
Well, 4 years older than I
4
was.
years older. Okay.
And
Okay.
let's see, what else I was going to tell you about him?
So you're a number cruncher. You got a dude 4 years older than you shows up with his dad's car at 95 cents. You've had a
Yeah.
good date bowling, and he says, "What do you want to do?"
Right.
So what do you do for 95 cents?
Well, we went over to, he called Gene. That's his friend. Gene and he knew each other from kindergarten on, and said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well," he says, "not much." He says, "Well, pick up. I think he was going with Sadie then, and so we picked them up, and drove around. Then we went to the park and sat around and talked. That was it. And then he says, "Well, I still got 95 cents. Let's go have a sundae." And so we did. And Gene I saw him talking to Gene alone first, and so evidently Gene had some money too, and so that's what we did, and that was it. That was the date.
Okay.
So
Now, let me back up in your childhood a little bit more. You had told me that when he met you, you were still a pagan, an unsaved girl.
yeah, oh yeah.
So your family, were they nominally Christian, sort of post-Catholic, or just...
We didn't go to church.
was there any understanding of spirituality or religion of any kind? Like,
Well, we were within walking distance of the Lutheran Church, just about 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks, and so we were sent there. My mother sent us there for Sunday school, and then she started going, and she got very active in the church,
the Lutheran Church.
the Lutheran Church,
Okay.
and the fact is that Patsy has her recipe book that she has, and that my mother had, and we were there until I think I was in 7th grade, and I decided I didn't want to go to church anymore, so I didn't go.
Right.
And so then some people, when I was in high school, some people moved next to us, and they were going to the Episcopal Church. And my dad says, "That's a good church. That's where I used to go." Boy, he says, because we had a good basketball team. So
Those Episcopals, they can play.
yeah. So I went there.
So, but your father never went to church?
No, he worked Sundays. He
Oh,
didn't.
okay.
He didn't have to, but he liked to check on them. So he would come home maybe about 3 o'clock or so,
Okay.
and then I went with them then. There's no bus service or anything, and so they took me, and I was in high school then. That's where I was in high school, because Mrs. Ashland was her name, my Sunday school teacher, and she said, she never opened her Bible. She said, "You know what? I just had a gypsy tell me my fortune. I'm going to take all of you to the tea room." That's all we did.
Oh, dear.
We went to the tea room there. I know where all the gypsies were in those days,
Okay.
and where they were telling the fortunes. And so I got disgusted with that. I thought, "What the heck with them?" And I did join the church. My father insisted. So I did join the church, but then I didn't go. And then when Laurie, it was the second day, he says, "What church you go to?" I can never remember. I can't forget this. And I said, "I don't go to church." And he says, "Well, you're going tomorrow. I'll pick you up." With that, he walked away. I says, "You're going to do what?" And he says, "I'll pick you up at," he told me the time, 10:30 or 10:45, and kept walking across the street. And I came in, and I told my mother, "Oh, the nerve. He wants me to go to church with him." She says, "Good, go." So I said, "Oh, all right." In those days, you minded your mother and father. And so I went, and I thought, he knows his Bible. That minister knows what he's talking about. And then I looked at Laurie, had a Bible with him. And I don't remember what it was. I'll say Matthew. I don't know what he said. Laurie walked in. I said, "Isn't he smart? He knows where to look." And I didn't know an old or a new. I didn't know anything about a Bible.
What church was this?
This was the First Baptist Church.
That was First Baptist Elmhurst.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And well, it was over in Gray Street then. And so I continued to go. We went every Sunday. I didn't know there was a Sunday school, because we only went to church. And then when war broke out and he went into the service, I continued to go, because I thought, I'm really learning. So I had a Bible, but I didn't know where to go or where to start with or anything, so I just closed it. I figured, oh, well, that's pretty good. I'll go to the church. And I wasn't saved until we had 3 kids.
Really?
We had 3 kids, and they used to have evangelicals coming by and at different churches. And we were living then in Peoria, and it seemed like every place I went there was a Christian family. I thought, is that all there is? I mean, during the war, and of course his mother and her friends were praying, and that's what I had. I had Christians all around me, and I went to church wherever, even during the service. When Glory was at the service, I went, and so Pat, she came back, and she was a daughter of a minister. And she said, how about going to church with me? I thought, oh, not another one. I said, okay, I'll go. So Lori and I went to, it was an evangelical church, a sermon at a high school. And I heard it, and I thought, oh, my goodness. And so then they had a call. And I said, I got to go. And Lori said, all right, I'll go with you. And I went forward. And that was how I don't remember the service now. I don't remember everything except I had this feeling. And I had to go. And I had to. So from then on, I got into Bible studies and everything.
All right.
So, yep.
So how old were you at that point?
I was in my 20s then.
Okay.
Because I had 3 kids. It must have been 23, 24.
Okay.
Something like that.
Still young, but married with 3 kids. At 24, I was still in college. I took a much more meandering path. Oh, okay. Cool. So, growing up, what was your family like? Like, you had cousins directly across the street.
Yeah.
Were there like big family events for holidays like Christmas and that kind of thing?
Well, no, we were always with my dad's side on holidays. I don't know what Aunt Georgie and Uncle Billy did. He had family. I know that they probably got with. We would go to Waukegan for Christmas usually, to my grandpa and grandma's house.
This is your father's parents?
Right.
Okay. What were their names?
And because then my aunt was there and some cousins came, and her 2 boys. I really only knew Howard, her son. He was 4 years older than I was. Roy was 8 years older, so we had nothing in common. And he was dating a girl at that time, and then he was married.
What were the names of your father's parents?
Grandpa was Arthur Christian Litchfield, okay. And Grandma came over from Ireland, very thick accent. Her name was Elizabeth Coppathorne. Now she was a Huguenot. The Huguenots came from France, and they were Protestant and Bible believers. And the King Charles said, go in and kill all of those Bible believers, or Huguenots. And so I don't know how they got word that the soldiers were coming to the village next to them or someplace and had killed all of them, babies, everything. And so they picked up what they could carry, and off they went before they closed the borders and got to Switzerland. And they stayed for Switzerland, but so many of the Huguenots were there, it was overcrowded. So he said, okay, we'll go to Ireland. So they went to Ireland. And then when some of them moved, they had to change their name because they had, and the Pope and the King wanted them killed wherever they were, find them and kill them. So South Carolina was full of Huguenots at that time. I don't know. So I really don't know if that was my grandmother's real name or not.
Something that she picked to avoid
because whether they
detection.
changed it, well, there were copper thorns in Ireland, but that's when they changed it.
Okay.
So I don't know if they did or not. I asked Grandma once, tell me about your life. She said, I don't have it. She said, I don't want to talk about it. And then one day she did. She said that they were going to a Protestant church, and of course Bible believing, and a priest used to stand in the corner and just the banshees will get you. I'm going to send the banshees. And she said, when you're little, you're scared to death.
Sure.
And so she said, our mother used to take us and walk us to school and come and get us then. And so when she got to Waukegan, she wouldn't go to church. She was afraid that they would follow her, And so it's she had quite a life, evidently, being a Protestant when they were all the southern part of Ireland is mostly all Catholic, and it's the northern that is Protestants, and they were in the southern, and so I don't know what let's see, her family were lawyers and doctors.
Okay.
So that's all I know.
Do you know when she came to America?
No.
Roughly, like how old she was? I mean,
No, I don't. She won a beauty contest.
All right.
She was 18 then. She was 18 because they had a beauty contest, and then they had to do something. So she did the Irish Jig.
Now, was that here in America already?
That was in Waukegan.
Okay.
They had she had relatives or so. I don't know how she got to Waukegan, and so then my grandpa said he saw this girl dancing and thought she was the most beautiful girl, and they finally married, and when I used to go and stay with him for a weekend, he would always go down, and I'd hear him singing, and he'd bring Grandma. Before she got out of bed, lemon juice. And she liked to have lemon juice before she got up. And he was, and he died before my dad. My dad died before my grandpa.
Okay.
And that was very sad.
Sure.
Very sad. So.
Wait, so your grandfather met your grandmother because she won a beauty contest, essentially?
Yeah. He got acquainted with her. I should have asked him how he got acquainted with her, but I never did.
Perseverance, I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's those are your grandparents on your father's side.
Right.
In Waukegan.
So,
What about on your mother's side? Because you said you had a grandmother or great-grandmother living with you.
yeah, great-grandma.
So
I had a great-grandma and a grandma. They were my mother's mother and my mother's grandmother that were living with us.
What were their names?
My great-grandma was Hannah Schur, and her maiden name was Mitchum.
Okay.
And then her grandma was Elizabeth Schilling, and her maiden name, of course, was Schur. So.
One of them or both of them were from Ireland, or what was?
They were
Where were they from?
My great grandma. She was funny. She lived with us, and she was so funny. And she said, I was in the spelling bee once, and Charlie was too. That was her brother. And because they were the top spellers. So she said, my word was picnic. And she said, so I said, P-I-C-K-N-I-C-K, picnic. And she said, and I lost. She says, I never heard the word before. And she said, I sounded it out, and that's what I got.
Were they both American born?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Wisconsin.
Oh,
Her father was in the Civil War. In fact, I have some history on him. And he was a lawyer. And he told his wife, and I don't know what her name was or anything.
Right.
That tell the kids that God is colorblind, and you don't treat people like this. They are people. And so she said that's when my mother always told us that. And so she said she was 2 when the Civil War, when her father left. He never came back. I'll have to show you that. It's the commanding officer told him that we have to get into Richmond, which was full of artillery and everything. They knew they had to get in there to end the war. So somehow they were going to blow up something, and there was a deep hole there. And he said, she told me, she said, well, what happened was he ordered the soldiers to go in there. It would be a shortcut. Well, they got in there and got trapped. They couldn't get up that steep hill. So the Southerners came by and shot some, and others they captured. And he was captured. And she said 2 of them, his buddies, came by after the war and said, there wasn't enough food for us. And he says, of course, the Southerners didn't have either enough food. And he got sick and weak, and he knew he was going to die. So he said he passed his food on to someone else. So he said, just take it, because you're going to live and I'm not. So he died. So that was my great-grandma.
Okay.
She was quite a gal. So,
I got a house full of family.
mm-hmm.
So, did you guys do anything special for holidays? You said you went to visit family in Waukegan. Did you have like traditions? Did you do the putting a tree in the living room that we do today?
No, we did that at home.
Okay.
Grandma and Grandpa had their own tree, and I think, my aunt, Ruth, and her boys lived in Waukegan, so they would go over there and help them trim the tree.
Okay.
And
did people do the whole Santa Claus thing back then?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know when that became popular.
We didn't. I mean, we just waited for Santa Claus to come the next day. That's all. But, it was, we had a happy time.
Yeah. What about Thanksgiving? Did you guys do anything special for that?
We usually had Thanksgiving. And Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Ruth and Jack and the boys would come. And so I think, I can't remember too much. It was either us, well, Grandma had it first. And then she just couldn't do everything, she got older. So then my mother took over. So, I'll tell you something else.
Sure.
My grandpa had a brother, Charlie Litchfield. Okay. My grandma's name was Elizabeth, and so my dad's mother was Elizabeth. My mother's mother was Elizabeth. And Uncle Charlie's wife died of cancer. And so he was lonely, and he'd come over. And, of course, Grandma was living with us. Well, the 2 of them got together and got married. And so I had 2 Grandma Elizabeth Litchfields. And I had Uncle Grandpa. And so, I mean, he was my uncle, now he's my grandpa.
Usually I got to go a lot farther south to find an Uncle Grandpa.
So he got the biggest kick out. My mother says, don't you call him that. I said, why? and so my dad told him, and he got the biggest kick out of that. When I came in, I called him that anyhow. I said, hi, Uncle Grandpa. And he he just laughed and laughed. Oh.
Right, I want to ask you about 2 more things.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I remember you at some point telling me that as a child you would hunt snakes for fun.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about snake hunting.
Oh, that was nothing. We would go to the prairies. There was a lot of snakes then, grass snakes and garden snakes. So we'd just pick them up and snap it. That would break their neck and they'd die, and I'd tie them on our belt. There's nothing.
Did you do anything with them later? Like, did you have
No,
a
we
collection?
just throw them away.
Okay, so you tied them around your belt just to wear for the day, just as your trophy of the day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how old were you when you were doing this?
I don't, grade school, I think. I don't remember.
I want to know how old my daughter should be before she goes snake hunting.
Well, it must have been 4th or 5th grade, I guess, or
Okay.
possibly even the 6th. No, 6th. I was beginning to. No, I wasn't 6th grade. It had to just be younger.
So this was just for fun, though?
Yeah.
This is just when you're not playing baseball, you're
Well,
snake hunting?
yeah, we were. You know, we had. In our day, we had to find our own entertainment.
Sure.
And that was it. That was one of them. So then I got a bike, and then we started Well, I had to have a bike to get to junior high. That was Hawthorne School for us.
Okay.
And so for the summertime, I could take that. Otherwise, then for winter, we had to walk.
Okay.
And that was quite a ways.
I imagine.
So
Okay.
that was it.
Well, secondarily, do you remember what your first theater film was when you went to go see the first movie ever?
No.
You remember any of the early ones? Like, what are some of the earliest films you remember?
I think we saw Alice in Wonderland. That was colored. Oh, yeah, that was the. We went because it was colored. All of the others were black and white, and they made
Okay.
that in color. Oh, everybody was going because there was a colored movie.
This is the Disney cartoon, Alice in Wonderland?
No, it wasn't Disney. It was live actors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was. That would be in the 30s, because they were talking then. Before that, in the 20s, it was silent movies. I went to a couple of those.
Did you see Wizard of Oz in the theater?
Yes, and that was colored.
Right, that was
Yeah.
the big gimmick, because it starts off black and white,
Yeah,
but then they get to Oz, and that was
Yeah.
like
yeah, I
was
saw
the
that.
3D of the day, I guess.
So,
What were some of your favorites? Do you remember, like, having movies that you really enjoyed that you told people, hey, you got to go see this? Was that a big thing? 'Cause movies are huge right now. Like, my whole life, it's TV and movies. Like, you got to watch this show, you need to go see this movie. Did you guys, was that a thing? Or
no,
was it just,
that wasn't it. I mean, if you had money, you went to the movies. I joined the Girl Scouts because if I was a Girl Scout, I only had to pay a dime to get into the movies.
oh, nice.
So, and I learned a lot with Girl Scouts, but
Sure.
otherwise, I don't know what it was. I know it was a quarter for Sunday, and we never went on Sundays because that was too much.
No.
Oh, we couldn't afford that. My brother and I, at one time, my Aunt Rose, they didn't have any children, and she came and she said, "What are you kids doing this today?" I said, "Well, we don't know." She says, "It's a good show?" "Yeah, it's a good show, but we can't go because it's a quarter." So she gets us 50 cents. She says, "Go." 50 cents. Oh, my goodness, we could spend this for a year, you'd think.
Right.
50 cents. And we kept looking at it all the way. We had to walk from, we lived on Mitchell, and we walked to the York Theater uptown.
Oh, the York was, all right.
Yeah. And all the way, he'd take it out of his pocket, and we'd look at it. 50 cents. I can remember that so clear. Oh. And you know, other people, and he said, "I got a nickel." And he says, "Maybe we get some popcorn." I said, "Oh, no, don't spend it. That's too much money." And so we didn't spend it because we thought we better not. So,
Wow.
so that was I don't even remember the movie now. All I can remember is the 50 cents.
It's a big deal.
Gosh, that was something.
Well, there's a lot to learn. I've spent about an hour here, so I'm gonna let your brain rest. But can we do this again sometime soon?
Sure.
Show up next week. I'm just gonna keep asking you what the world was like, because I have this tiny little window from like mid '80s until there's big holes. Like I said, I don't remember the names of the people I lived with in college. The people I lived with, I can't remember them. So I'm just amazed that you can think, oh yeah, in the 1920s, so and so, and did this. Like, I'm just amazed that you have the kind of mind that can do that, because my brain's been replaced by apps on my phone, so I can no longer remember things. But there's an app for that. Anyway, so I'm going to share this with the family, and I appreciate you taking the time to tell stories.
Oh, that's
So,
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.